Brang dang 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 diong bram dang diong. Okay, so James's truck is back. This is our next update. It's been a month or so since the last one, but she's in full dress rehearsal, meaning like all the kind of main components are in there except for the engine and trans to get the vibe across of what she's going to look like: stance, wheel tire, ride height, most accessories. The interior is pretty dressed up too. We got her going. So part of this is I had to really push James for a minute to bring her to the off-road expo, and there was no better truck to bring for Terra Crew than this, just because it's James and it's his. And I think with him, he just doesn't like, he's a selfless person, so he never wants to like embrace his own stuff or, you know, make anything of his like important or part of his life. He's so, I don't know if that's a good way to describe it, but he's about everybody else before himself. And so even like him bringing his truck to the Terra Crew booth at Off-Road Expo is like a hard push for him. But I bugged him about it like 2.5 weeks before, and then went to the Sand Sports show, and I met him I was there Friday, and then I met him there on Sunday, and he's like, dude, did you say something to people? I was like, no. He's like 50 people came up to me just today and are like, are you bringing the Frontier? Are you bringing the Frontier? Are you bringing the Frontier to Off-Road Expo? So at least the power of the masses and people gave him a pass to bring it. So we just did like a big hustle the weeks, you know, up to the Off-Road Expo. And this is what we got. Okay, last thing we talked about was welding all this. So when we saw this thing last update, this was partially welded. I think it was like 67%. No, 68. I remember it wasn't 69. It's 100 now. It's all, the interior's completely done. I still haven't, I saved all the TIG, the silicone bronze rod just from the interior, so we could just have fun with it and figure out how many feet of rod was used to weld this thing. But you can get in there and kind of see everything's complete. The cab's sealed. There's a couple spots we couldn't get to, like just tricky ones by the B-pillar, areas like that. I don't even know if you can really see them, but what we'll do is once it comes back from powder coat, we'll put like a 3M body seal in there. One of the big things you can notice that we added is the secondary A-pillar. So just thinking about this thing the way it is, it's really tricky to get like a big door bar section with how tight everything is and the constraints of the occupants in the cab. Where if you had like a big door bar situation, like a you know, all kinds of stuff laced up on the sides of the cab here, it would be so tight in here, you'd be banging elbows, banging knees, and feel really claustrophobic. So the next best thing there to add structure, when these things roll, they always kind of take an impact right on this corner where the top of the A-pillar is, and this always kind of bends in. So if you notice, like on a lot of race trucks, they always have a secondary tie in here, and that's what I call that, is a secondary A-pillar. So we actually cut the cab out in this part here. You can kind of see the seam and where it's like blended now. So that was removed. The sheet metal that was down here was removed. And then we, you know, what that did is that opened up an area for us to get full welds on not just the top, but the bottom and all the way on the chassis. So we also welded it from underside or underneath the truck. This just adds an incredible amount of strength to what was there. You can see that it's tied in with 2 more tubes, and it's the same per side. The tape right there are guesses for feet of welding rod used in this thing, so we'll cover that next time. But that's the biggest structural part that we added. The dead pedal here, which is like super, I don't know if I was gonna say super awesome, but this is a great thing to have, especially in a smaller truck where you can brace your foot on here and really have some control where you're not just flopping around. So I was actually able to salvage that piece instead of just making a new one. So that's kind of nestled in there and it works perfect. I mean, obviously you can see like the secondary pillars here, but your foot fits perfect there, and then you have good brake control. I think what we might want to do too is do some kind of like a heel, like a pivot for your heel, for your gas pedal, so your foot's not just floating, you know, like just freestyling right on this pedal. Another, just kind of looking at, we added so much stuff, I don't know if there's going to be a good order to doing this, but like the steering column has a new structure here to hold it. So it's just kind of going with the flow of everything else, dimple dyed. This is all 063 chromoly plate. And then obviously the handbrake is a new addition. So I'm gonna cover that from the other side. You can also see up top here, there's just your standard like race truck style adjustable spring-loaded visors for sun, just to get the glare down. All the tabs for the lights are welded. There's some standoffs for the roof. So these guys are just gonna help the roof from vibrating, and like, especially when you close the doors, if the cage is like, see, the cage isn't like perfectly tucked in here, and this was just done before, but when you have something like that and you close the doors, you hear like a boom, like almost like a percussion, like a bass hit off a speaker. So having some standoffs like this, where we'll put like a weather strip in between the sheet metal and the chassis, that's gonna make it just like you close it and it doesn't have any kind of weird vibrations or rattling or percussion like that. So there's 2 in the front, and then there's also 2 more in the rear there. I have that, I've done that in a couple trucks, and I have it in Beth too, and it works really well. Unfortunately with my white truck Beth, I had to do that after the fact because I finished the whole thing and then I got in and closed the doors, and it was like a, you know, it's almost like when you have your rear window down in a SUV and the only one person has it down and everybody's ears are boo, and it's kind of like that same pressurized feeling. Just touching again, so everything's silicone bronze welded. That's kind of the go-to welding procedure for sheet metal, not just sheet metal to sheet metal, but sheet metal to like thicker material like the tube, or thicker plate. It's just silicone bronze it melts a lot easier and it bonds a lot easier, so it's not really structural, but it's something where you can put less heat into it, and then you're not going to get like surface deformation by trying to heat up rod to weld to thicker material and thinner, and then it's like it'll start deforming and warping. So one of the challenges with this last kind of update was we knew we wanted to run a handbrake. Some people call that a Hoon handle, but it is a handbrake. This will have dedicated rear redundant calipers, so that's why you see like another reservoir and master here. This will power its own like single pot rear calipers, probably Willwood, and you know, the fabrication and design aspect of this, it was tricky because Originally, we built the shifter mount back there, and that shifter mount was kind of its own like piece in the middle of the truck, and I needed to make some careful moves when adding to that, so it looked like they both corresponded with each other and were designed to both be there. So this mount is just tied in, same thing, chromoly, thin wall chromoly plate, 063. The battery cutoff is also in a really good spot. A lot of times you'll see the battery cutoff in a weird spot and or maybe just a less favorable spot, but what you really want to have for a battery cutoff is somewhere where the driver can reach it with his harnesses on, and he doesn't have to like go down below his feet or reach really far with his arms, and also the passenger can get to this thing now, just in case something terrible happens with the driver, he's not conscious or something, and you need to cut the power to the truck. At least two people can reach it relatively easy with their harnesses on. So that stuff's pretty good. I think what we'll do is for the Holley display, you can see the intrusion bars here for the windshield. We'll put the Holley display right in between with like a pod, and what that can do is it saves like the space on the driver and passenger, where this can be open and not as closed off or claustrophobic feeling, because when you get in here it doesn't feel uncomfortable, but it definitely feels like you're in a very small cabin. And I think that putting any kind of big like instrumentation or dash stuff in the driver area or the passenger area, you can spare doing that and just put it right in the middle. The other cool thing is you can make it squared up in the middle, and all of the occupants will be able to see the display, because the cab is so narrow that you'll be able to see it from whatever position you are in the car. And I can just see just by the size and the spacing here that the Holley display that we have, it's like the 12-inch. I think they call it like an 11 point something or whatever, and excuse me for not knowing, but that will be the optimal size to fill this space right here. The other thing I want to do is have a analog fuel gauge. I like to just have that be a mechanical thing where it's not digital, and you can always rely on that fuel gauge. I think it's a real pain in the butt to have a pre-runner and not know the fuel level or if it's working accurately. It's just a preference for myself. So we'll use the Holley for everything else, keep the fuel gauge just a little odometer, and that's it. The switch pros, there'll be a 12-button switch pros, so I think this space in between the visors up top would be a great spatial thing for it, where the driver and the passenger can both reach up there, and it gets things out of the way and a little tidier down below here. The dead pedal here, this thing had to be redone too, just because we added that secondary A-pillar. So it is what it is, but I tried to save the original one, but the way that the holes were, they were already like we were cut into the previous holes, so it didn't make sense to try to retrofit that. This is a really easy piece to make. Something to think about too with our like next steps is the plumbing. There's not a lot of room in the trans tunnel, and the exhaust is right there too. So I don't know for the hard lines like what we're gonna do yet, and the soft lines, but like trans cooler and oil cooler, I mean, that stuff needs to go to the back. The fuel lines also need to go to the back, so we need to make some kind of executive decisions on what the safest, most tasteful way of running lines from front to rear is going to be, either through this cab with some kind of protective like shield on them, or make provisions for them to go under the chassis away from the exhaust. You guys can see like the seats are in. Everything kind of fills up in here a lot more now. Harnesses are in, just kind of mocked up. PCI headsets are in here, just kind of a proof of concept and display for the booth. Obviously the fresh air from PCI is in here. Safecraft bottles in here. I think what we will do is all the brakes and the controls that'll get like hardline, we'll have them like really sanitary and kind of just mounted, just exposed wherever it makes sense in here, kind of like an aircraft. If you like look behind the skin of those things, you see like really nice, all their hydraulic lines and all their hard lines are really tidy and kind of just laced through the chassis. And we'll do the same thing in here, so it's got that raw machine look. The booster, this is the booster seat that PRP has, and the rear seats are side-by-side seats. So when you put the booster seat in here, it turns into a booster bed. So that's not really doable, but it'll work for the front. Again, these are the side-by-side seats, so they work well. Like I've stressed this before, this is not for like a full-size adult back here. It is for James's kids or you know, other kids, or just if you can fit back here, like a 6-foot person can fit back here, but it's not safe. It would be something just if you wanted to go from, you know, camp to camp, or if you wanted to get some guys in here just to unload and film at a location. That's the primary purpose of this. But, you know, more than anything else is just having amenities and space for James's kids to ride in here, and it'll be perfect for them. These are James' original doors. You can see like they used a different cab, which is this like pewter silver color. But this is like the OG James doors, you know, with his OG buddy. And I think he raced a couple MDR races with this thing. So it's cool to retain some of the older stuff. I think the doors are really like the only thing that we have. The rear shock package was retained from before. What I wanted to show you though is we talked about running the OEM door panels, and the way that this, like the OEM door panel sticks out, right? So it's got like your armrest and your controls that come out, you know, a couple inches at least. And already even when they go on the profile, like sets over this, and it goes out maybe 3/4 of an inch, and then it comes out a couple inches. Where when you close this thing, like it's so close to the driver, it doesn't work for packaging. It just, you need to free up some space in here, not just for how it feels, but for just not, you know, having contact points with your body while you're driving, especially at like a race pace or just when you're going fucking. So the secondary A-pillar also, now it needs some space. So what I'm getting at is we needed to do door cards. There's kind of a difference with a door panel and a door card. I like to call these door cards just because they're flat. And a door panel is more like of a 3-dimensional part. And maybe I'll show you the Jeep that we have in here has the 3D door panels. But these are just, you know, they're the optimal thing for the application. And I think that they fit the truck really well. The rear has them too. So it just, the design, as far as this goes, Colin, he's my newest guy. He helped with all the meat and potato of this thing, as far as getting like doing the whole layout and getting the skins to fit in here. We redid the configuration for the switches. So this is all factory stuff, but it's just mounted vertically instead of horizontally. And it just makes sense functionally. Like, you know, you can see like the writing's upside down here, but functionally the windows, if you want them up, you pull them up. You know, if you want them down, you push down. So it made sense to lay them out like that. There's still a child window lock here. And then obviously you have like your standard door unlock and lock and open and all that stuff. So design wise, you can see like there's, every time I do like a rib like this, it's for function and purpose. It does look cool, but it really is for grip. And if you think about, like, if you put grip tape over this thing, which that's what it'll get, this adds another element of you know, grip or traction with your feet getting in and out of this thing. And the door panels, I just wanted them to carry some of that design into the door panel, and that's what we get here. So obviously you can see the ribs, and they're progressive, so you can see that the spacing, and these are just details of design, and it's stuff that I stress, and I think that once you do it correctly, it really ties stuff together. So This is all staggered where the spacing, it goes progressive. So you'll have a smaller spacing here and then it'll span out bigger and kind of lead off almost like you're shading something. This is just a cutout. I mean, the speaker is mounted there. There is no speaker in here right now, but this is just a material breakup, I call it. Just where you have a lot of extra surface here, and getting some kind of material breakup just breaks up that space, and it doesn't seem just so, you know, wide open and empty. We did the same thing in the rear. So obviously that just has a little tiny hit of breakup, but that's all it needed. And same with this, like it's just a downsized version of the front card. So kind of get a good perspective there to there. And then it's our standard kind of signature thing we do with a two-tone, like a grained surface, and then a dual action orbital sanded surface. So these are just easy. Obviously we got this thing kind of factory looking too. So this thing's seated in there. Everything just works and functions. So when this thing gets wired, it will have power windows. I don't think it'll have power locks, but the windows are the most crucial part. Yeah, I want to kind of, the other thing I want to stress too is like not just the space in here, but like the controls are really tailored. And fortunately, like James is pretty much my size. So, I mean, obviously, like, you know, but he's height-wise and arm length-wise, I think that we're really similar. So I've been able to kind of sit in there and tailor it without having to like, hey, can you come by and sit this thing? Every truck we fit the client to, so that's kind of how it goes. I mean, obviously, like most vehicles, if they have a seat slider, that does one thing, but it's really nice to have the client get in and be able to figure out what makes them feel comfortable, and you know, where the pedals are in relation to where they're sitting, and how their leg angle is, and where the steering wheel wants to be, and then where the controls want to be. So that's what I wanted to showcase in here. It's really driver oriented. Cool. So you can kind of see, like it's not terrible. I mean, yes, it's tight, but this cab is also narrower than a Ranger. So you get what you get, but you guys can see, like, that's why having like a big door panel infringing on some of the space, like, or even big door bars, you're already in shit creek putting a big door bar in here. So, you know, this is the safety that we needed, and I'm comfortable with that. The space from the A pillar to the C pillar is not terrible. Like if this was a full-size crew cab truck, I'd want a lot more like structure in the B pillar area. But since you're run from this point of the chassis to the C pillar, which is like back, you know, the rear portion of the rear door, it's not enough for this area to make much of a difference. So we have it tied in as much as we need. I've thought about the door bar thing, but it's too hard to get in, and it's too hard to fit into this thing. So I feel good about this. This seems like the right thing to do. I also want to check what we got going on this side, so you guys can kind of see how these controls are interfaced with the driver. So let's check that out too. So you can see it's tight, but it's not uncomfortable. I mean, if you're like a 6'4" dude, it's definitely gonna feel maybe like you don't want to be in here, but that's not the case here, and it's tailored for James. The door panels obviously allow you to have some more room. If you had like if you had a door panel, it already feels like you're in some kind of like a single cockpit airplane or a glider in this kind of situation. I mean, it's almost like a one car, like a class 1 car style width. If maybe just a little closer if you had your co-driver a little closer. But what I'm getting at with this is, you know, there's a good position here for the Switch Pro. Like this makes sense. Just to look up there, it's not in any of your vision. and then you have like your shifting. So your lowest point of your shifting right here is also your lowest point with your e-brake. So you have the controls exactly where they need to be, you know, and obviously like this is kicked, so it pulls. When I sat in here, I made it in line with the motion of your arm, so you're not going like out or in, you know, that's always why you kind of see these at a certain angle. So that's why like that's there. It's the same thing with the shifting, you know, like when you're in first, I didn't want your hand to hit the reservoir, so that's why this is here. Like everything has, and then you go up and boom, you're around it. You know, so everything kind of has its place for a reason. Obviously the switches are easy for either one of these guys to handle, but that's also why this being open is going to make you feel like it's more spatially open in here, instead of having like a big closed off dash. Then you're like, oh my god, there's more shit in my face here and more stuff closing this off. So that Holley display being the size that it is too, it's perfect to go here. So if we have like a pod here, this is just a premium real estate here for that thing. I know that he wants to run a tablet with whatever app. You know, I don't think lead nav is going to be what he's using. There's another, and I'm sorry you guys for forgetting, but I know that James is working with someone that has a really awesome kind of trail and off-road map application. So he'll run that thing. We just need to, if you guys know of a good, you know, some kind of holder for a tablet that we can mount in the chassis. It doesn't have to clamp to tubes. I don't need that stuff. Just something that either bolts on. I'd prefer some kind of bolt on that's adjustable, that can hold up to impact and vibration. If you guys know, please comment below and recommend something like that. And that's what we'll have out here. It'd be really nice. I know in like a Dave Clarke pre-runner that he built for Tavo, he's got like a adjustable swinging GPS kind of like a mount, a fixture that comes out, and you can adjust it. So when you're running at speed, the co-driver doesn't have to be like reaching out or bracing his hand to press the button. He has it right here where he can kind of grasp it and do what he needs to do. And I think that would be cool if we had that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. I mean, James isn't going to be like pre-running gnarly races, but it would be a nice feature to have. So I think next time you see this thing, we'll have, as far as interior goes, we'll definitely have the center pod with the Holley. We'll have a provision for the analog fuel gauge. It could just be somewhere low key, no big deal. And then we'll have something for a tablet and the pod up here for the Switch Pros. So that wraps up in here for the most part. Done in there for now. Didn't really do much to the front except just clean it up, finish welding. So I think what we should do is pop the bedside just so we can kind of see the tin work back here and some of the accessories. Glass Tech also helped us out. I had them, these bedsides, I don't know the process with how they were made or how custom they were, but there's a lot of difference between this and the passenger side, or you know, vice versa. So Glass Tech has been helping us kind of reform the edges. This one was really inverted, meaning like it was kind of like a Leaning Tower of Pisa, where it was out here, it was going, you know, the vertical was going the wrong way. And if anything, for shape and design, you'd kind of want this to go in, if anything. So they've been kind of cutting and trimming, and I know they're not done. They just got them ready for the expo, but they're going to go back there. They also added a detail into this cutout that we did, where they built a return. So it's not just like, when you see this, it's not just a thin layer of glass, but it's also got like a three-dimensional shape in here. We can look at that, and then obviously like the exhaust is not in, but these are the bezels per side. They're kind of formed to the body line there, and that's where the exhaust is going to be. It's just a different look. I'm kind of trying to steer away from having the, you know, the classic out the middle here. It's a pre-runner. I think that having like exits out of the bedside are the way to go, at least for this application. So I'll pop this off and we'll be able to look what's under here. So rear enclosure panels. I don't know if that's a term for them, but that's what I call them, vertical enclosure panels. Obviously vertical because they're on the vertical part of the chassis. This stuff, it's great for a truck because, I mean, obviously it cleans things up, but it also keeps things clean. It keeps debris and shit from going in there, mud, dirt, rocks, sand, cactus, bushes, whatever. You can see the remote oil filters back here. So that's kind of just a easy spot to change it. But touching on the panels, I wanted to, as far as design goes, like the bead roll is there for a reason. Obviously, functionality of a bead roll is when you, I've said it before, like with the Chasing Passion stuff, is when you have a piece of paper, if you just like assume the sheet metal is like a piece of paper and you have it and it's flimsy, and then you just fold it and you just do a crease, and then you kind of shake it again, or even if you crinkle it up in a ball and then you stretch it back out, it's going to be more rigid. It's the same thing with sheet metal panels. They, you know, bead rolling is functionally for rigidity. So how you do that is where design plays a key part. And as long as you're living by the function, you can form it to be functional. With the rear portion here, James has kind of a history of being a straight edge kid, and I don't, you know, need to go in depth about his personal life, but James has like been solid with being straight edge his whole life, and I've been into hardcore music and stuff. So I did want to like do a little pimp my ride, like, you know, like, oh, he's into fish, so I put a fish tank in there or whatever the fuck they do. So same kind of deal. I just put an X in there just for layout, just as like a nice little Q. It's the same with the straps. We could have done a Y strap, but opted for a X back here. And it's just a nice little hint of who James is for the people that know. And as far as the panels, they're like a modular design. So obviously this guy starts to go up top here, goes under the cooler. We have an open cavity for the fuel cell, which actually cleaned up really good. It was so roached out and dirty, and just a little bit of degreaser on there, and that thing is golden. You can see the jack handle is in its home. The fuel filler is all complete. We redid this thing. It was just like clear hose for like a long run. And with that, like I always see those clear hoses, they get roached out and they turn like yellow and just gross. And I figured we can opt for as much aluminum tube as we can. And then what we have down here, like this clear portion, this is like your fill indicator. When you have a fuel cell truck, most of the time, you can overfill them and it's pretty gnarly. They'll just barf all over you with fuel. Sometimes like a filler at a pump will stop it, but a lot of times it won't. So as long as you're paying attention, you can go under here, you know, fill this thing up while you're standing at this point, and you can visually see once the fuel goes right here and it gets here, you have enough time to stop it before it goes blah, 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 blah. So that's just it's little details like that make life a little easier. We have the Safecraft bottles. These are, you know, just regular fire extinguishers. We're gonna have the suppression as well. But these are also a very important part, whether it's for you or someone to help you put out a situation on your vehicle, or you need to get out and run and help someone. These are like awesome. They come apart really easy. I can show you guys. I just got to put the camera down. But this mechanism they have is like, it's amazing. I mean, obviously, the only thing you'd have to watch out for if you got some, you know, some tweakers or something by you, they might want to just pop that and take it. It's pretty easy to steal, but it's also easy because it's easy to use, and that's more important than anything. You can see there's some fluids or fluid containers back here. So everything's just finding its home. You can kind of get a visual on where the fuel pump and filters are going to be. This is just an old mock-up guy, but there will be two here. You can access them through here if you wanted to. If you needed to change a filter out or a pump, you'll be able to get to them right here. This is just a loose panel, so don't trip on that. But yeah, 2 fluid containers or fluid holders, and then you can see the Odyssey batteries are hiding back there, and they're also accessible. The other kind of notable accessory we added is these shovels. I've had experience with all the different shovels, and you know, the classic thing you start off with is the military shovel, which is just a little, you know, fold it and screw it together, and it's this tiny little thing for maybe digging sandcastles at the beach or something with your kids. But for being stuck out in the desert, I think 4-footers with handles are optimal. And the other thing is, usually when you get stuck, it's not at a favorable time, or you need to get unstuck as quickly as possible. More than likely you have someone with you. So instead of having just 1 shovel, we have 2. You can see this mounted under the jack, and it's mounted in the same configuration as the other side. Now what we did is these outriggers, you can call them, where the jack picks up and mounts, that's where we tied the shovel into. And obviously the packaging, we had to, you know, we had the whole truck apart, so we figured out where this thing bumps and then where it articulates and bumps, and made sure that that handle up there was clearing all that stuff. Because, you know, if you build a truck and you just bump it out level, that's not what it's going to do. And you need to bump it out and articulate it. And it's a key thing, because it's very dramatic what the shocks do. You know, as far as if it articulated this way, the shocks will dive in. It swings, everything swings. And your tire, especially in a larger tire size, it gets very dramatic with how far it'll camber in or out. So the shovels are in this location for a reason. Everything is isolated with like a rubber hose on here, so they don't move. They're solid. And I'm gonna go to the other side just so I'm not laying here and you can kind of see a little better. The older you get, the louder your noises are when you're moving. Isn't that right?
Very right.
So you can see this guy, it's like, they don't move. So just figure out where, I think we're gonna sell kind of a platform here where you can buy like a universal shovel mount kit and just plant it where you can make sense of it on the chassis. But what I was getting at is the outriggers for the jack. These are the same width, and this leaves us room to either put a winch. We're kind of talking about having an onboard winch where we'll have it wired, where you can plug it in the rear or in the front, but at least it can live like on the side of the truck. It will probably weigh a little more than the Pro Eagle jack that's over here, but it'll at least balance things out. These things all have lanyards on them. So I always recommend this stuff, and we just did this detail for the expo. Obviously we'll have to deconstruct this thing when powder coat goes down, but this is key for anything that you remove off your truck. Like just having it on a lanyard like that, like that's, if you have to use your shovel, more likely than not, you're gonna lose the pins for this thing, just either where you're at or because you're busy getting unstuck. And it's the same with like your trailer ramps and stuff like that. These pins are just, they go missing. So anytime you can lanyard stuff, that's what needs to be done. When we final assemble all the fluid containers too, or the fluid holders, we'll do the same thing with these little pins. And anything else that's like removable like that, it's a really good thing to have and be able to kind of cover your steps like that. The tricky part is in the rear, we're talking about doing a tailgate. I like it how it is. I think, you know, James likes it how it is too. The tailgate, what we'd have to do, I have a Frontier tailgate. We'd have to it would just be a skin. So it's not gonna be like, it's not gonna be a functional thing. It would be something that's got Zeus buttons, just something that's easy to take off to get to the spares. but what you can see is this profile, like if you're going from point A to point B on this plane, it would have to roll. James's tailgate is flat, and it's also got like some three-dimensional shapes. The first impression I do for it is to skin it and get just the exterior surface of it, and then maybe like metal shape it to where I can get that radius, because it has to be radiused. I'm just in fear because everything on the shapes, you know, like even the tail light and the leading edge of the bedside, everything's telling us to go square straight across. So to put like a radius in here, I don't know if that's going to be an optimal thing. The next thing we could do is maybe we run it right to the tire, and just have it kind of go across and have the tire exposed, or maybe we just don't. It's something to think about. The cutout in the bedside is another kind of problem that we need to find a solution to. It is cut out because when we bump the thing, it's fine and it tucks under the top surface of the bedside. But when it bumps and articulates, that's when things get hairy, and there's 4 to 5 inches of the crown of the tire here when it's articulating. So that really puts us in a bind with the shape of the bedside, because it's nice to have this flat top versus like a big hump. So I don't know right now how to address that solution, and I will definitely figure it out, but do it tastefully where it's not gonna detour from the silhouette and the aesthetics of the exterior of the truck. The other thing too is to run, we talked about doing a top panel. James has this big boner for thinking that the rocks are gonna come up and kick this window out, and I think it's because it's happened to him multiple times. So we're gonna find a solution, and I mean, originally it was just build like a containment enclosure panel, a top horizontal panel. So you have your vertical panels, and then you have like a horizontal one that kind of spans across from the top of the bedside over to the chassis and like kind of hugs the tire, might go up and above and have some like mesh venting for the coolers. This just presents its own problem now because it does need to be elevated somehow. So that might mean reconfiguring where the Safecraft bottles go. They might have to go into a different spot somewhere, thinking about where a tasteful spot is for that. And then possibly when I skin the top surface, have that come flat from the cab on the profile of the bedside and then break up and maybe follow like a new profile line that's higher than the coolers, where it breaks up here and then comes slowly gradual down. And if we can get that right where it's just enough to clear that tire when it articulates in, then we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's the concept I have right now. Something to look forward to for next update. The tailgate is also something for next update. And then we talked about the electronics inside. So the Switch Pro on the upper pod, the Holley display on the middle lower pod by the intrusion bars, the windshield intrusion bars, and little odometer gauge for the fuel. And then the front, James wants to run a valance, which we talked about that last episode. It's kind of just like a skirt, if you will, for the front. I have all the material to do it. I was gonna get that going before the expo, but just as far as time management went, it would be a rush job. I didn't want to shit the bed on something that's an important focal point of the truck. The way that valance would want to go, this mechanism with this hood, it goes off the rear pins, you pull it, and then it kind of sets forward. It's got like a double mechanism, a double hinge. So it sets forward, and then when it sets forward, it flips and it goes under the bumper. So either you have a limited area where you can run the valance because this thing has to go, so it can't be that deep, or it can't go out wide, or we tab it and it goes right up to the top of this, and I think that's obviously the plan I'm going to go for. And then it breaks, so it follows this contour, which is 1 radius, and then there's a step here, and then there's another radius that gets progressive and tightens on the outsides. So you can shape that pretty well. If you tastefully put the tabs in the right spot, it'll hold the shape. And you can also like break and heat and form the ABS or the UVHP, I think it's called. We'll get into that next update, but you know, we'll do some kind of treatment here. It won't just be a big tall flap all the way across. I'll put some design and some shape into it where it has a home with the truck. So those are things to look forward to for next update. I hope you guys kind of enjoy fall on this thing. It's definitely special. It's got really cool proportions. It's just fun to look at. I want to, you know, make sure we get the ride height as similar to this as possible. The front is the only thing that doesn't check out. The back is kind of ready to party like it is. So we just want to, you don't want to have it too bro runner. I do like the bro runner stance, but I think for this thing, just having it level is nice, and it's just going to be functional. So wherever that key shock shaft and up travel is, that's where we're going to run it, and it is what it is, just so it works all the way. I hope you guys are liking this thing, and you know, if you have anything you want me to cover that you see on the truck, just comment, and we'll do our best to cover it. And thank you.